What's up, e-bike fans? In this video, breaking news, Rad Rover is now up to a version 6, and this bike actually looks pretty awesome. They've done some significant upgrades to this bike as far as the design and some also components, and I think this is something, there's one key factor I think will make this bike a huge hit. And finally it's out there, and I'll go into it. Let's get started, and I'll see you in the video. Okay, so this morning I woke up, and the first thing when I'm checking my emails, I noticed that I am so late to the game and that there was a brand new launch of the all-new Rad Rover 6. So this bike actually, for me, I'm thinking, well, okay, Rad Rover, what are they going to do? Is this hopefully going to look any better? And as soon as I saw the picture of this bike, I thought, wow, they are actually really making their bike look like it's coming up to I guess a more modern looking bike. I mean, some of the old ones were very cool looking when they first came out, but it got old. To be honest, people just didn't want it to look so much like a monster e-bike. They were starting to go away from the classic look. And when I'm scrolled through this and I'm thinking, what else did they do to it? That sleek design is really cool. I love the look of this bike, but let's take a look at what else we got here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I also want to compare. I want to know why people might want to get this bike, because the other thing I noticed is that it was significantly higher in price. I mean, if you look at the different prices over the years, let's look at the most recent version of the Rad Rover 5 is now selling at $16.99. Okay, and before that, when we're looking at the comparison, now this is off of Electric Bike Review, because these guys, they got their hands on the bike, and their video was already pre-made, so obviously they had done this review days before putting it out. But if you look at it, I mean, even when they first published their 2020 reviews at $14.99, and Rad Rover had not, or the Rad Power Company had not actually increased their price for a number of years. And now all of a sudden now we have it at $15.99, at $16.99 after that was a $200 jump. And now at today we're having it at $19.99. So there was the most recent video I had put out about supply chain issues that were going on out there. And one of the significant articles that had come out is how Rad was able to get 54 days shaved off the delivery time by doing some really interesting supply chain redirection using smaller bolts. And so the thing is, they are still not really incapable of getting around the cost of containers. And that's one thing that's been a huge factor for all the e-bike companies. Also, the 15% tariff, that they're all being hit with that as well. So they're having significant increases in their cost overall. They had to bring their price up sooner or later. There's not going to be something that's going to be able to hold them back on this, because everything's going up in price. And now they're just having this new bike. It's a good time for them to do it, because they can absorb, or at least take some of the hit of the negativity. Someone's gonna, I mean, I know some people are saying it's not gonna be worth $19.99. So first of all, let's go ahead and just do some comparisons really quick to go over these bikes. Of course, the design, you can actually see this is the Rad Rover 6 versus the Rad Rover 5, the straight regular version, the non-step-through, and then right here next to that we have the step-through versions of the 6 versus the step-through 1. The big deal about this new design, I think, is what's going to make a big hit in the market, is that the new design can fit smaller riders down to as low as 5'2". So if you look at some of the people selling or reselling bikes of the Rad Rover 5, number one reason I saw where very small mileage, only ridden for a few miles, everything that I keep saying about why they don't like it, it's too big, doesn't fit, too intimidating. I mean, there's so many. Constantly, that's what I'm seeing, is that people are selling the bikes because it's just too big for them. So they're now taking that into consideration. They're having these bikes actually being made smaller, and that's one of the things I think is going to be a big reason why this bike will take off. The other number two reason is their reputation. Rad has a phenomenal reputation of taking care of their customers, and now they are having more locations that you can, in bigger cities, especially the metro areas, they're actually opening physical stores. So you're going to have this transition of people now looking back at the Rad again, because there's a lot to look at. It's a solid bike. Yes, it might not be the fastest, and it might not be the most powerful out there in the class, but when you don't have to worry about maintenance or just worry about customer service that you're going to be taken care of, that's one of the reasons why I went with Bolton with my Bolton Blackbird. Besides, it was a torque sensor, which was the number one reason on that, and the price and everything that came on it. The other reason is I knew that was going to be taken care of. Something people will notice right off, which grabbed my eye, is that you are actually getting less torque. But if you watch the videos and what they're claiming on it, you're actually getting more power somehow on this. And it's because they've actually changed their gearing ratios in this. So they're actually did something to the motors, custom manufactured, custom redesign, I guess something about their engineers. You know what always kind of disturbs me about this though, is they never put their motor peak output. And that's a little vague. And of course, they've been slammed about this before. People saying it's a 500 watt motor with a 750 peak. They're saying now it's a 750 nominal with a higher peak. And they're not mentioning the peak yet. You can calculate that. I mean, there's something we can look into. It doesn't matter though. I mean, the bike is still 750. If it is a 750 max, they just should really state that. Okay, so on the other part of that, if you don't need all that power, I mean, if you think about it, even the electric XP is a 500 watt. The 500 watt motors are doing great. So this bike can actually pull. Now, the other thing that I've noticed that was significant is that it's 5 pounds heavier on these new bikes that are coming out. But it's an e-bike. They're heavy anyway. These guys make really good bikes. I've ridden one, very solid. I am not necessarily maybe their demographic because I like a little more speed and power, but I would not hesitate to actually ride one every day. I mean, it's a solid bike and it goes fast enough. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You have a max peak speed stated at 20 miles an hour, which is class 2. They have a new display. Another I think something that really excited me is this display actually has a clock. I know it might take its own separate battery to keep the clock always on time, but needless to say, there's a clock on it and it's a very nice display. So they've done a lot to go ahead and make it a little more user-friendly in that way. Same cadence sensor, again, top speed is staying 20 miles an hour out there. Weight is now 74 pounds versus the 69 that was there before. And the estimated range, again, for max is 45 miles that you're going to be able to get on this. Because the battery size actually hasn't gotten any bigger. But from what I understand, the battery's a little lighter. Here, the geometry measurements is, I think, going to be number one reason why this bike is going to do really, really well. Okay, so you have, even with the step-thru, a reach of only 15.6 inches, which brings the bike a lot closer so the smaller rider can use it. You're also going to have the seat can go a lot lower now. The standover height is at a 28.5 inch versus before was 33. That's a significant difference on the height. Okay, so, and on this one, on the step-thru model, you even have a standover height of only 16.5, of course, because the bar is so much lower, but a 29.5 inch minimum saddle height, previous of a 33.25 minimum saddle height. So you have this 4 inches difference of the seat coming down. Is the $19.99 worth it? If you're comparing it to last year's prices, then you're going to be disappointed because everything's going up in price. But when we're going to look at all the bikes that are coming out now, this year's models, and the prices that we're going to be seeing increasing across the board, I believe prices will go down later when we get the flood of bikes in the market, but it's not going to be immediate. It's going to be probably a year or two out. But for now, we're in a scarce time for e-bikes. So everything's more expensive for them to bring it in. The other thing that they've done is a lot of people complained about the Rad Rover brakes in the past. And now it had mechanical brakes. It could stop the bike, but they all said that they wished it was actually a little better. I mean, there was significant complaints, I guess, or disappointment in the brakes itself, and they've gone with hydraulic brakes. And that itself is usually about $100 or $200 more, depending on what kind of hydraulic brakes. And it's not a name brand that I'm familiar with, but it still get 180 millimeter rotors on that. So, you know, it's a good size on that. And for those of you who are not familiar with hydraulic brakes versus mechanical, it's kind of like, you know, I know my demographic is a little older, so probably some of you will be familiar with either power steering and no power steering. I mean, today almost every car has it, but if you've driven older cars that didn't have power steering, it still drives. But as far as the steering would go, you can still drive the car just fine. But when you're, you know, on slow moves and slow turns, you'd have to really use a lot more strength. And the same thing goes with these mechanical brakes versus hydraulic. Hydraulic brakes are like just tapping them and they start to slow down, and you pull a little harder, you immediately, your brakes are locking up and slowing you down immediately. Where mechanical brakes, you can still lock them, you just have to grab a lot harder to make it happen. So the responsiveness is definitely there with the hydraulic, and it makes a difference. It is a very significant comfort to have hydraulic brakes, in my opinion. Like I said, nothing's wrong with mechanical, they work just fine. But once you start riding hydraulic, you're like, this is something I'd rather have if you've ever compared the difference. Okay, wheel sizes are the same. Pretty much the rest of the bike that you're looking at is really all similar all in all. There's just a lot of design differences that make things better. As far as the controller is now integrated inside, or it's hidden, so you don't have this big controller box sitting in the backside of the down tube. The battery is also integrated. It goes inside now, and that's significant as well. But here's the look of the bike. Okay, a lot more sleek. Now, what I noticed immediately when I looked at it says, hey, it looks like a lot like the KBO. And it does. I mean, but KBO, you know, had this design out coming a lot earlier. Still, it has these the motor controller in the back, where now Rad has this little thing here, which is actually a USB connector or charger. It's not actually a controller. The controller is built in. The battery goes in pretty significantly into the frame, so you do still get a sizable battery, but it's not sticking out like it looks a lot like e-bike. You know, I mean, and that big battery hump on the old bikes were very evident. You could see it sticking out here, and it took away space for a bottle boss, you know, as well. And these are all accessories. And again, it's one of those things that they don't come with it because you're gonna have to buy it separately. But you're looking at $19.99 with a rack. Does it compare to a Hemingway with all the accessories? It's a different bike. And when you're talking about customer service, if you've ever heard or read the customer service complaints from Hemingway versus what you're gonna be getting here, it is a big difference on that. So I just want to bring that to your attention as well. Again, this seat can come all the way down. It looks like you're actually below the tire if this comes down. And if we look at the pictures of riders that are smaller, this girl looks like she's probably pretty small, and the way her leg is bent, that seat is already at right on the touch of the top of the tire. It's a 14 amp hour battery, still 672 watt hours, 48 volts, and according to what we have here, you have a 18 amp controller. Here, 18 amp draw. So it's a potted motor controller, 18 amp draw with a 75 amp peak output. I don't know what that means and how you're going to get from 18 to 75 peak amp output on that. But if it is an 18 amp controller and you have a 48 volt battery, you're getting 864 total watts on that. But basically, you're not going to be getting the 1100 watts like the other bikes that are out there with the 750s or the 1300 watts like the juiced bikes. This is not a high performance type sport bike or, you know, fast speed bike. This is a cruiser, definitely, and it can go off-road, and you can, you know, take it pretty much almost what they call all-terrain, right? But it is heavy, and it has front suspension. Right now, it's just the announcement. I think they're not going to have these bikes available until September. So yeah, estimated shipping is September 30th. So you'll be looking probably in October. It's going to be something interesting, really fun to see if when these bikes start hitting the mainstream and everybody's reviewing them even more. So I'd love to hear what you guys think. If I ever get my hands on one of these, definitely going to go ahead and take it for a ride and get some footage on it as well. Always impressed with Rad and how they built their company. They don't have what people would consider the best bike, but you know what? You got to admit, these guys build solid bikes. Okay, and there is definitely a rider and a demographic that's for this. It's for the rider who doesn't need to go 28 miles an hour. It's for the rider who wants to go 20, who wants to just enjoy the ride and can do that on a very comfortable fat tire. And now they're even making it more not only approachable, but they're actually making it more comfortable. I honestly think this is a winner for them. It's going to be huge. This is something even I think my wife would probably, she's about 5'2", she'd probably be a lot more comfortable on this because everything is closer and lower to the ground. Brilliant move on Rad Rover's part. I think they're going to be able to get a lot more riders onto their bikes now, and even at the higher price point. So anyway, in the meantime, thank you guys very much for watching. This was not an in-depth review. I just wanted to go ahead and make sure that I let everybody know the Rad Rover 6 is out. I'll see you guys in the next video, and thanks so much for watching.